page 471 in the synthesis of yoga. And we're looking at the ladder of self-transcendence. And Sri Aurobindo so far has been talking about the three kinds of consciousness that are available to us, that we manifest. And he's calling them the physical, the vital, and the mental. And each of these, as we experience it, is really a projection on the physical plane of a independent plane of consciousness. And so he, in this chapter, as we've studied it so far, has gone to these independent planes of consciousness and described them, and talking about the principles and how they manifest in us in this form. So when we come to this place where we are, he has just covered the mental plane of consciousness, what he has called the Manomaya Purusha. So that is the Manomaya Purusha is the mental being, as he says, the subject, the subject of the mental consciousness, the mental being. And that's what he's describing over here. He first talks about the mental being as we experience it, and then he talks about the deeper and higher possibilities of the mental being, because what we experience of the mental being is also only a partial experience. So, as we know, some amount of mental consciousness is expressed in animal life, even as primitive as the insect. So there is, even prior to that, in as Sri Aurobindo points out, that all these layers are included in each other, so that even in matter, we find that all these planes are latent. And then again, we find in life, before the organization of mental consciousness in a physical form, which is what we call the brain. So prior to the appearance of even a nervous system that is centralized in a brain, there is a kind of subconscious mentality. So plants have mind, but it is unorganized. It's spread throughout their anatomy, so to say. And then you have the appearance of animal life, and quite soon some sort of a rudimentary brain starts appearing. And that's a way to organize a nervous system which has a material connection with the mental plane. And so we keep developing, as it were, in an evolutionary fashion, greater and greater capacities to manifest the mental being. And that's what we experience as mental beings. When we call human beings as mental beings, that's the extent of the mind that is manifest in us. But that is not the entire extent of the mind, as Sri Aurobindo is talking about. So there are two thresholds that we fall, kind of behind, as it were. And one of these thresholds is a cosmic threshold. In other words, it's a threshold of height. We are reasoning beings, and we are at our height, rationality or reasoning being. And then we have capacities of the mind, like imagination, which seem to be connected to understanding, but not the principal faculty of mind that we are utilizing to come to understanding. It is involved, as it were, in the process of understanding, but it is not the primary faculty we are using, which is our rationality, our ability to utilize what is called symbolic logic. Our notion of categories is mapped onto the world using a certain rational capacity. So this is our access, but this access is limited to the individual. In other words, mentality is always subject to our sense of being a separate individual. It's our mind, as it were. It's our rationality. It's our understanding as an individual. However, beyond the threshold of this understanding are universal or cosmic capacities of mind. There is a cosmic mind, or there may be what Sri Aurobindo calls cosmic mind planes. So that is one aspect of the threshold. And the other aspect of the threshold is the waking mind. In other words, what we experience as the waking consciousness that is processing the data of the external world and coming to sense about it. And Sri Aurobindo is saying that also is a threshold, and behind it are more expanded states that we enter into only in sleep and trance, or that is acting from the behind our waking consciousness and influencing us from behind. And these capacities also have a gradation from the individual to the universal, so that we can talk about a individual subconscious mind. Sri Aurobindo will use the term subliminal mind, liminal beyond a threshold, but this individual subliminal will expand to a universal subliminal. And from this universal subliminal, things that we don't know can flood into us. So there is that access to a universal consciousness. Actually, those who are familiar with Jung's work will find some resonance over here. Jung's model of the self includes exactly this conscious part, and he uses the term unconscious for this, what Sri Aurobindo is calling the subliminal, the part of the personal unconscious that opens to the universal unconscious or the collective unconscious. So the collective unconscious would be, in this case, the universal subliminal, according to Sri Aurobindo, from where we receive intimations from other people, from archetypes, beings of the subliminal world, universal beings, and can acquire knowledge through these capacities. So this is the part that Sri Aurobindo is considering, where we stopped. And I think we can, actually, it might be better to start from that small paragraph at the end of page 470. Man too has in himself subliminal, right? Start from there and read 2 paragraphs, maybe, that will catch us up to where we are right now. Okay. And I'm wondering if maybe with Swaha, would you be open to leading us there? Page 470, bottom of the page, man too has in himself.
Lost my book, so I'm actually on the screen for a change. Man too has in himself subliminal, unknown, and unseen, concealed behind his waking consciousness and visible organism, this mental soul, mental nature, mental body, and a mental plane not materialized, in which the principle of mind is at home and not as here at strife with a world which is alien to it, obstructive to its freedom and corruptive of its purity and clearness. All the higher faculties of man, his intellectual and psycho-mental being and powers, his higher emotional life awaken and increase in proportion as this mental plane in him presses upon him. For the more it manifests, the more it influences the physical parts, the more it enriches and elevates the corresponding mental plane of the embodied nature. At a certain pitch of its increasing sovereignty, it can make man truly man, and not merely a reasoning animal. For it gives then its characteristic force to that mental being within us, which our humanity is in the inwardly governing, but still too hampered essence of its psychological structure. It is possible for man to awaken to this higher mental consciousness, to become this mental being, put on this mental nature and live not only in the vital and physical sheaths, but in this mental body. If there were a sufficient completeness in this transformation, he would become capable of a life and a being at least half divine, for he would enjoy powers and a vision and perceptions beyond the scope of this ordinary life and body. He would govern all by the clarities of pure knowledge. He would be united to other beings by a sympathy of love and happiness. His emotions would be lifted to the perfection of the psycho-mental plane. His sensations rescued from grossness. His intellect subtle, pure, and flexible, delivered from the deviations of the impure pranic energy and the obstructions of matter. And he would develop too the reflection of a wisdom and bliss higher than any mental joy and knowledge. For he could receive more fully and without our incompetent minds deforming and falsifying mixture, the inspirations and intuitions that are the arrows of supramental light, and form his perfected mental existence in the mold and power of that vaster splendor. He could then realize too the self or spirit in a much larger and more luminous and more intimate intensity than is now possible, and, and with a greater play of its active power and bliss in the satisfied harmony of his existence.
And you notice that there's a footnote there.
Yeah.
In the first line where he says, it is possible for man to awaken to this higher mental consciousness to become this mental being. And there the footnote says, I include here in mind not only the highest range of mind ordinarily known to man, but yet higher ranges to which he has either no current faculty of admission or else only a partial and mixed reception of some faint portion of their powers, the illumined mind, the intuition, and finally the creative overmind or Maya, which stands far above and is the source of our present existence. If mind is to be understood only as reason or human intelligence, then the free mental being and its state would be something much more limited and very inferior to the description given over here. So this is a very key paragraph. These last two paragraphs are very key paragraphs which pertain to the very meaning of this chapter, which has to do with how to build the unbuilt ladder, the ladder of self-transcendence that as he says, is not individualized in us. It's individualized only up to a point. And when we say individualized, we mean it belongs to a sense of self, but whatever we experience as sense of self is that of an exclusive self. In other words, the I that is separate from the others. But what he's talking about is the full capacity of a mind that has a sense of exceeding its exclusive boundaries, so that there is a kind of, knowledge of others as well as forms of oneself to some extent. The contact with others as intimate contact of knowledge takes place there. So this is the point that Sri Aurobindo is making. And in a way, see the kind of one of the, sort of, points where modernity begins is this turn to recognize the fact that humanity understands the laws of nature. That itself, it seems to be so, it's so much of an assumption for us. We take it so much for granted. We go around trying to understand reality, whether by our common sense or by a systematic and methodical way, which is what we call science. Science is an attempt to use our mind to arrive at a systematic understanding of the laws of reality, of nature, particularly the reality we experience. But what is really quite an amazing thing about all that is that we can understand these laws. That itself is a profound thing, which marks the beginning of the modern era. It's the deviation, it's the separation from dogma, from people telling us what reality is. Because we recognize the fact that we have something by which we can understand the implicit reason. The Western tradition uses the big word, logos, that the logos is understandable by us. In other words, the logos is immanent to us. To what extent? We don't know, but it seems to be immanent to us. And our attempt to arrive at that is what motivates our age to a large extent, the thirst for knowledge in our age to a large extent. But given our own faculties, there is a limitation to that. A limitation to understanding, which is the result of the exclusiveness of every mind. We can say the laws of mind are universal. In other words, what I understand, you also can understand. What you understand, any other human can understand, because that is the whole tenet of science, that these laws are universal and we have universal access to these laws. But we don't arrive at it individually. We arrive at it collectively. That's the whole idea of a knowledge academy. Ultimately, the knowledge academy, just like the brain, is a organized material substance to embody and manifest the mind, so too the Knowledge Academy is a collective organ to organize and manifest universal reason. It is something which each individual can tap into and feel as the extension of their minds in a way. So that is the search from a certain point of view of modernity. But in ourselves, we do not have direct access to, if there were such a thing, the reason of the world. We don't have direct access to it. We have access to it through the summing up of our collective knowledge, and we can utilize it. But Sri Aurobindo is saying over here that we can have access to it, that the capacities of mind, individual mind, become universal and cosmic capacities, so that we can grasp at once the reason of the world, so to say. That's the point he's making over here. Now, that also is a limitation, as he will point out. There is a limitation to that. But still, he's talking about the possibility of the human actually embodying that kind of a mind. And this is really what he himself discovered in the jail as the unfinished evolution of man. Up until this point, the assumption was that human reason is always going to be what it is. We are fixed beings. We will always remain beings with the capacities that we have right now. Of course, there's already implicit in yoga, as well as in certain lineages of Western philosophical thought, as for example, in Nietzsche, the idea that we are not essentialized beings, that there's nothing in us that will remain the same. It's possible for us to exceed ourselves. The Sri Aurobindo is moving in that direction and saying that the human is not defined. The human is given, but the givenness of the human does not need to be accepted as the definition of the human. The mind of man can become a cosmic mind. And that's what this chapter of this paragraph is holding out for us. And if it does that, then what he says is the result. And he's calling that, in a way, arriving at a more truly human consciousness. Human in the sense of, this is the ancient, at least Indo-European and perhaps universal idea of man, because in the linguistic etymology of man or human is or manava, from which you could see the correlation of man and manava. Manava is related to mana. Mana is related to, the manus. The manus are the cosmic mind beings. That's why he's saying, out of this universal mind, our existence has emerged. Our existence, that which we experience, a cosmic mind. So this cosmic mind, he's also equating to the overmind Maya. He's using that term, the overmind Maya. The Maya, in other words, Maya here has to be understood as a power which organizes reality as that which we experience. It's almost like saying reality is given a shape that we experience. And we participate in that. In a way, we are also making reality, but we are making it according to a certain utilization of mind, but powers that are presently beyond us. This entire argument, it has very interesting resonances with Enlightenment thought. Are we capable of knowing reality as it is? Now, what Sri Aurobindo is saying is that as we are right now, we are not. But the mind that we have is porous to higher and deeper universal capacities of mind that give us access and that we can enter into and become. And if we do that, then yes, we can be equal to the overmind Maya, by which reality as we know it is presented to us as our experience.
Debashish,
Yes, Anastasia.
would that mean that if we can realize the overmind, realize that plane of mental consciousness, which Sri Aurobindo calls the overmind, would that mean that we can create or materialize a new, we materialize this plane, which is a mental plane of consciousness, materialize it, that we can materialize it and sort of create a new material world? Or can we ever only, will we be ever only able to experience the mental, the overmind as such, this mental consciousness of the overmind in this earthly plane only? Is it possible to change that or not?
Yeah, so in a way that there can and will be the possibility of a transformation of our existence, but not only to a degree. So the difference is this, Anastasia. I mean, I'll give an analogy, which is an analogy only, but it is like saying that there is a projector in a projection room in the cinema hall that is projecting a film. And we are in that film and we are acting out the roles that the film is projecting on the screen. And we take it that we are actually doing the things that we do. And this screen and this projector are maybe a little more complex than our normal screen and projector, because we have a sense of reality and we have a sense of participating in the reality that we are creating. That also is the fourth dimensional projector's effect, okay? It's making us participate, and we think that we are participating, but we are really being made to participate in keeping that world. Now, if we were to know that, right, suddenly we awaken to the fact that there is a projector that is actually projecting the coherence of what we call this cosmos in which we are acting, then we come to the mind of the projector. But we can't do anything about it. We come to the knowledge of the fact that we are that being that is making the world. But the projector has been put in place. In other words, that is a faculty of a higher consciousness that has kept this cosmos in place. So your ability to transform this cosmos creatively is limited to the ground rules of that projector, so to say. You become equal to those ground rules, but you can manipulate them only within the substance of that particular, ability, that capacity. See? You can't go beyond that. You can't bring in new laws into the projection. See, the laws are already determined. So you are equal to the laws. You know the laws. They are your laws. They are cosmic laws, and you know what they are. That's your power. See, you can't change the laws.
I can't change the laws. But okay, there is the projector is given, but we are also a projector, a constant. We are equally projecting constantly.
Yes.
But it's only a projection. It's not a possibility to actually change.
No, what we are projecting is under the law of the bigger projector. That's why I said it's like a fourth dimensional projector. It's not a flat projector. It's a projector that's making you project. So you have the sense of agency.
Yeah, I understood. I think I understood. Just a quick additional question here in this context, because that was also on my mind. In which way the scale, the evolutionary scale of Sri Aurobindo, of these planes of consciousness, this ladder of transcendence up to the supermind, in which way that corresponds to the different dimensions, and which dimension correspond to which scale in Sri Aurobindo's ladder. Because now you just mentioned the fourth dimension, and I was asking myself whether the overmind is, for example, perhaps the fifth dimension, or can that be said at all? Or why does the fourth dimension?
Yeah, Anastasia, the use of the term dimensions is relative. There's no absolute way of using the term dimension. I used it in a relative sense, because when I'm saying that normal projection, if we take normal projection to be a three-dimensional projection, you could call normal projection to be a four-dimensional projection, okay? Because if you say that the normal understanding today of time as the fourth dimension, you could say it's a four-dimensional projection. If we do that, then yes, you're right. You could say that what we are actually experiencing is the, capacity to mimic the fifth dimension within these four dimensions. You see? So overmind Maya would be a higher dimension than the dimension we experience and that we participate in.
Must be, yes. But would the jump not be rather bigger even? Because we have the silent mind, we have the illumined mind, we have the intuition in between up to the overmind. Should there not also be correspondingly one more dimension in which to penetrate?
You could say that, but actually those are subplanes. They're not dimensions. Yeah, they are within. This is the mind, mental being. The overmind is the mental being. These are subplanes of that being. Just like rationality is a capacity of, ultimately rationality is a capacity of the overmind. Sri Aurobindo will have a chapter in the Life Divine called the supramental reason, right? So even what we experience as rationality is just a capacity of the overmind, and that itself is a capacity of the supermind. So this dimensional change takes place from the supermind to the overmind, from the overmind to the more limited functioning that we have, which is the drop in dimension.
Yes, I think I understand.
I think the dimensional change, Anastasia, between us and overmind is between exclusive individuality and cosmic individuality. That is the dimensional change.
Kindly repeat, between exclusive
individuality, exclusive mental individuality, and cosmic mental individuality.
Why exclusive?
Because we take ourselves to be exclusively real. You know, each one of us has a sense of our own existence as exclusively real.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
We are assuming each other's existence. But so long as we are in the mental consciousness that is, you know, limited to what we experience as humans, we experience reality exclusively as each one of our realities, right? I don't know
Right.
what your reality is. It's like what they call the hard
Right.
problem of consciousness. I don't know how
Right.
you experience reality. What does it mean to you? I only know what it means to me. And that is a dimension. But to have the cosmic dimension is to be able to experience other people's experiences of reality as well. See? Because
Right.
overmind experiences as each of us, you see, but it's stuck in its own laws.
And in that gap between overmind to supermind, the overmind is actually only a delegate of the supermind.
Yeah.
So would it be fair to say that perhaps in that gap or jump up to the supermind of the overmind, there wouldn't be additional dimensions or subworlds or...
No, I don't know. There could be. I don't know. I have no idea. But it is another dimension directly from overmind to supermind is another dimension. This is the reason why the whole idea of the triple transformation comes, which is really a jump from the individual to the cosmic and then to the supracosmic, you see. So these are the three dimensions that he's talking about. Each one of those dimensions, like the individual itself, can be talked about as a reality that has its own three dimensions or four dimensions of space and time, right? So when we use the word dimension, we are using it relatively, and it has to do with what we determine to be the basic experiential axis, you know, space-time. If we say space-time and causality, then those become the three dimensions. Each one of them can have these are philosophical dimensions, not physical dimensions.
Right. Yes. Thank you so much, Debashishji. Thank you so much.
I think the paragraph is drawing our attention to the paradoxical nature of the Maya when he says overmind Maya.
Yeah.
So the connotations for Maya is like it's deceptive, illusionary, misleads us, and we're always trying to come to terms and trying to see beyond the Maya play in this human
he's actually
life.
not
Here he's saying overmind Maya. Yeah, so that's like the other face of Maya, that it's so you know, it's the creator who's brought this whole plane being. Right. So
in fact,
so
you're right.
it's showing us the other face, like it's the overpowerful.
In fact, he does not.
Yeah, that was very interesting.
So the illusion making understanding of Maya, Sri Aurobindo doesn't accept that. He's accepting it. What we call an illusion, he's calling a creative power. He's saying there is no illusion. It is a creation.
Yeah. We perceive it like that.
We perceive
as human
it
beings. As earthly, we perceive it and we get so tangled up and and the other paradox,
Janita, it's also our choice. It's our choice. If we call it an illusion, then it is an illusion to us. If we refuse to call it an illusion, it is a creation to us.
Yeah, like how the feminine and masculine, and we get so taken up by that whole thing. But otherwise, these are the two creative forces. You know, that's the play of Maya. Yeah, that's so beautiful. Yeah. And the other thing which came to my mind was, like they say, when you said that being able to perceive other people's reality and not just being islands in the sea of collective unconscious. Yeah.
Exactly.
And in that, I was reading about this book by this doctor who said sensitivity is a superpower. Like they say, oh, you're so sensitive, and they kind of delegate that person to, oh, you're so emotional and you're so stupid, and you get taken up by all these thoughts and feelings and emotions, and so. But then there's this other side to it, being sensitive. So sensitivity is a superpower where you can permeate another person's reality and feel their feelings and their experiences.
Yeah,
Right?
sure.
And
That's
yeah.
so when he's talking about the subliminal mind, exactly that we have other capacities that belong to a greater mind that allow us to exceed, our island-like existence.
Hmm. And then it also parlays into when we live out our karma, that even karma philosophy is like, oh, you're cursed, or, this had to come to you and you have to go through, that nemesis, you've got your nemesis, all those kind of things.
Yeah.
But when you, but another side to it would be like through the karma philosophy is being the seeds of evolution of your mind. That when you're going through whatever,
Yes.
it's seeding your evolution.
Very true.
Even those
Absolutely.
difficult dark periods or whatever that you have
Yeah.
in your fate and destiny, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Those are seeds to your
greater evolution. Yes.
Hmm.
And see, for the interesting part about this, what he's talking about over here, which is actually what really was a revelation to him in the jail. He didn't know about it. He started off thinking that this is the accepted understanding of reality, and that's where we are. And you see, the thing is that we've been, even the great sages are telling us we're trapped and we got to get out somehow. But what he's saying is that the reason they're saying that is that they're accepting us, our condition as it is, while it's possible for us to evolve to the state where it's not necessary for us to escape anywhere, but to have those capacities as just extensions of what we are right now, as a greater living.
Yeah, building our capacities. Yeah.
Yes.
But how can we do that beyond intention? Beyond pure intention only? How can we really know
when
that
you
we
use the
that?
term intention, Anastasia, what is intention? Intention can be mental, right? In other words, intention can be the intention that we use our limited mental faculty to create goals and achieve them, right? But there are other intentions in us that are invisible, that are driving these intentions. You see, there are intentions in us that are making themselves known through these more conscious intentions. See, ultimately, there is a invisible life that is also part of who we are,
which drives us up the ladder of transcendence.
Exactly.
On the unseen side.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
but
a
yes,
great
it has to become intention at some point. It becomes conscious at some point.
Yeah.
That which is unconscious, in other words, that which is not conscious to us, presses to become conscious, and that becomes intention at some point. But prior to that, there is a knowing that we have which is invisible to us. I think, yeah, I mean, whatever you call it, we've got lots of words for it. Some people call it faith. I'm not even talking about faith in the divine, but our normal activity is also built on some faith. There is some way where we think, I'm going for this because I think I can achieve it. So there is a kind of a sort of an unconscious knowledge of what is trying to achieve itself through me.
Yes.
That becomes intention, but the intention does not start with our calculation, rational calculation. It starts somewhere much more unconscious. It starts from a source which is hidden to us.
Yeah, what you had called the will to truth, actually. And then it takes over, it is grace which takes over from then onwards. I mean, once we have formulated the intention consciously, it can only be grace, which is the second wing that takes over and to drive us constantly forward.
Yeah.
I would say.
Sure, yes.
I think, I'm not sure, but how can it be otherwise? It is the grace of our innermost,
yes,
of our innermost self and psychic being.
Yeah.
Back.
Yeah. Shall we move to the next paragraph? So this is the 472 where we were going to begin today, right? And to our ordinary notions, right? So who would take us there? Sunki, can you read today?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
So, yeah. And to our ordinary notions, this may well seem to be a consummate perfection, something to which man might aspire in its highest flights of idealism. No doubt it would be sufficient perfection for the pure mental being in its own character, but it would still fall far below the greater possibilities of the spiritual nature. For here too, our spiritual realization would be subject to the limitations of the mind, which is in the nature of a reflected, diluted, and diffused, or a narrowly intensive light, not the vast and comprehensive self-existent luminosity and joy of the spirit. That vast light, that profound bliss are beyond the mental reaches. Mind indeed can never be a perfect instrument of the spirit. A supreme self-expression is not possible in its movements because to separate, divide, limit is its very character. Even if a mind could be free from all positive falsehood and error, even if it could be all intuitive and infallibly intuitive, it could still present and organize only half a truth or separate truth, and these too not in their own body, but in luminous representative figures put together to make an accumulated total or a master structure. Therefore, the self-perfecting mental being here must either depart into pure spirit by the shedding of its lower existence, or return upon the physical life to develop in it a capacity not yet found in our mental and psychic nature. This is what the Upanishad expresses when it says that the heavens attained by the mind Purusha are those to which man is lifted by the rays of the sun, the diffused, separated, though intense beams of the supramental true consciousness, and from these it has to return to the earthly existence. But the illuminates who, renouncing earth life, go beyond through the gateways of the sun, do not return hither. The mental being exceeding his sphere does not return because by that transition he enters a high range of existence peculiar to the superior hemisphere. He cannot bring down its greater spiritual nature into its lower triplicity, for here the mental being is the highest expression of the self. Here, the triple mental, vital, and physical body provides almost the whole range of our capacity and cannot suffice for that greater consciousness. The vessel has not been built to contain a greater Godhead or to house the splendors of this supramental force and knowledge.
So here, this is another very packed paragraph. And really, he's getting to the crux of his own project, what he's trying to achieve. And, we were talking, I think that analogy of talking about dimensions is handy over here, because these jumps that we are talking about, the jump from our ordinary normal experience, which is a matter, life, mind complex, and in which a certain kind of a mind dominates, or in a sense creates our experience, it is, relatively speaking, easier to expand that consciousness to a cosmic mind. Relatively speaking, it is not given to us, and it seems to be impossible to most people. I mean, it doesn't seem to be something which is, available to our ordinary experience. But the reason it is relatively easy is because there is a porosity. We are still operating within mind. We are operating, we possess mental functioning, and that mental functioning can be pushed. It can be enlarged. It can be in states of, attempting to maintain one's conscious awakened existence in states of deeper trance, one may say. If we try to enter into those kinds of states, we may be able to more easily arrive at or regularize or normalize cosmic states of mental consciousness. But what he's saying is that even this, to take the analogy of the projector, that's the point that was being made earlier, even if we get to the mind of the projector, see, there is a limitation, because the projector works according to a certain mechanism, and it's the mechanism of the mind. See? The mechanism of the mind has some laws. Its principal law is, as he says, a law of division. A law of division, which really makes classifications, which takes its stand on a certain reality, and by taking its stand on a certain reality, immediately creates an other of itself. This is at the center of the logical operation of mind, and it is the center of the logical experience of the being, which is mental. That's the reason why he's saying over here that its mode of existence cannot encompass the creative unity of the entire cosmos. It cannot encompass that. It is in that vaster way of being in which we experience the fact that the laws that drive us can actually be creatively changed to something which affects the entire, which we are, our larger body, one may say. So that's in a way what he's saying over here. Mind indeed can never be a perfect instrument of the spirit. Supreme self-expression is not possible in its movements, because to separate, divide, limit is its very character. So this ability to take a stand and to separate, limit, and divide is a function. And as Anastasia was saying, the mind, even the overmind, is a delegate of the supermind, or it's actually a function of the supermind, a function that, just like the projector, has got a office of doing something. It's a functional, capacity. But to get to that which is in being greater than the capacity, that to which the capacity is a capacity, not the being, there is a jump required, which is a jump to another dimension, if you want to use that term. And what Sri Aurobindo is pointing out is that even in the Upanishads, they're saying that either you can jump to that and forget about the mind and our existence here, or you can, that's what he's calling going through the gates of the sun, or you can come back and keep a distance from that. This is the point he's making, because there is no bridge built between that, even if we come into contact with that mind and the supermind. The Upanishad uses the term the hard lid, the hard golden lid. In other words, almost like a tapas, a kind of a will that is keeping a layer, a fold, through which we cannot pass. So a fold that in the continuity of being, that is like a barrier of kind. It's a difference in kind, because this is a capacity to it. It's almost like a difference between subject and object. What we take to be subject is there an object. Eka.
Yeah. Can you elaborate a little bit on that porosity part? Like, porosity, I mean, primarily means here the receptivity, right? And then between different, I mean, receptivity to the higher planes. And then that means when we become porous, meaning, is it that some kind of link that is already there, which was obscure, and that gets kind of focused, and by what faculty and what are the methods? I'm basically just a little detail on this porosity part.
Yeah, exactly. So this is exactly where, I mean, I think where we are concerned, the project of Sri Aurobindo, it's sort of, what are we meant to do to get there, right? Which becomes a sort of almost like a kind of a goal that Sri Aurobindo is proposing. And we can talk about many kinds of sub-goals, but particularly in the chapter called The Intuitive Mind in the Synthesis of Yoga, in this book itself, he's going to say that this porosity has to be mobilized by creating an intuitive mind. And what is an intuitive mind? An intuitive mind, he says, you have to use, Janita talked about sensitivity. You have to use all these forms of knowledge, like samgyana, pragyana, these, whatever is given to us, it's like we have a certain amount of empathy. That is a samgyana, ability to contact others. We have to maximize that. See, we have to stretch the boundaries. We have to stretch the boundaries of intuition. In other words, the receptivity to higher knowledge that comes to us. And he's saying there that essentially by creating that receptivity and regularizing it, at a certain point, the mental consciousness rises out and takes its place in that higher, what he calls the 1,000-petal lotus. And in fact, in his own case, what we are talking about right now, what happened to him in Alipur jail, and also the mother talks about the same thing with her experience after she came for the first time to Pondicherry. And met Sri Aurobindo. She says both of their consciousness took its stand above the physical body, physical head, mind, so that they were experiencing, when we say, where am I centered? They were experiencing themselves centered above and outside the body, above the head. So this kind of a ability to experience reality as a cosmic being. As a being, our individual being is almost like seen as a limb of that being. It is not inside us, but we are part of its existence. So expanding our capacity by receptivity, that the point he's making, it's a very interesting point. It isn't that we have to do something else to get there, but as we build our receptivity, this communication between the higher planes and our own mental planes becomes regularized to an extent that at a certain point the mind just rises out and takes its stand over there. So that in a way is the porosity. The porosity is entering, it's already there around us, but we are experiencing an identity which is only a limited part of it. So expanding that identity to what the center of that entire operation is gives us the utilization of the porosity to arrive at a transformed state of being.
So the method of this porosity, sorry, so the method is like contemplating that higher plane, or what is the exact method like?
That would be one. So for example, I mean, when we are talking about pragyana, vijnana, samgyana, they're all methods. So in other words, if we are increasing, like in that chapter, he's giving 4 methods. It's not one method. He's saying whatever method you can find, use it. So one of the methods is actually trying to contact by sympathy or empathy, that to contact by emotional contact. Another method is to contact ideas, that is by receptivity of the mind. And as you're saying, he's saying, if we have the faith that there is a source of knowledge above the head, then whatever we are asked to understand or do, we can refer to that source. See? So that's how he is getting at it.
So you've outlined 2. So one is the emotional intelligence, what they say, increase your capacity. So maybe the bridging stones are empathy, sympathy, love, compassion, tolerance, patience. Like in the Guru Granth Sahib, there is this line where it says that how does the sun and the moon and all these entities do what they are doing? So the line says it's the patience of that cosmic energy or the mind or whatever, which is holding all these things in place, and they do what they're doing. It's the patience, the quality of patience, right? And to follow that. Yeah, so then that means that these are the stepping stones, these qualities, to bring them and to increase the capacity to be able to house these capacities and these qualities in us as a human being, right?
Yeah. So what you
yeah.
talked about, like about the emotional capacities and the patience and the ability to empathize, those all he's assimilating to the psychic being. So he's saying that what we talk about as the heart, right? So ultimately, if we go deep enough into the heart, we find a source of unity, so that becomes one of the ways. Then the other way that he's talking about is what I said about, trying to understand by opening to a knowledge above us. That if we have the faith that, yes, there is a knowledge above us, whatever we are given to understand, we can open to that, and gradually we become aware that something higher than us is informing us. Then there's a third way, which can be a way of the will, that's intuition of the will, that I have an understanding of what is to be done. What do I need to do right now? Right? Sometimes we are very confused about that. But there is a way by which we can open to a intuition of action. The Gita talks about that, again, if you take it that there is a being who is really orchestrating everything in the world, then we can build a receptivity to that. And then we find that we receive messages. Okay, this is what you should do now. We call them hunches, so we call them intuitions of action. So there are a variety. Sri Aurobindo also talks about material intuitions, which is very sort of, ordinary things, like he's saying, how does a great cook know exactly how much sugar is needed to make a dish perfect? It's a intuition of the body. Great cooks don't measure the sugar, they just pick it up and put it there. See? So all these kinds of ways by which we are expanding our ability to, to go beyond our enclosure, our bubble, our island of being who we are, expands our sense of self to know the fact that something greater than us is the cosmic being, and we are part of that. And ultimately, if that is porous enough, we take our station there and we sense ourselves as a limb of that. That's how he's.
So what's the fourth way?
The fourth, actually, two of them he gives as porosities of the mind. One of them he's saying what happened to him through the nirvana, the mind became completely silent, and then something else descended. But he's saying that that's one of the ways. But he's saying that more easy on a regular basis is to open to a higher knowledge in our everyday life, So that becomes, there are two ways right there.
So the first one was the emotional, you said. The second is the ideas and the knowledge.
Yeah.
And the third is the power to will. Nietzsche and Jung come into this also.
Yeah.
And then the fourth way, I'm not clear.
So the second way, which is to open to greater knowledge, he's giving that in there are two possibilities he's giving. One is that those who do deep meditation can come to a state of pure silence, like the Buddhist nirvana or something like that. And then in that condition, one is made to feel as if something else is moving in one. So that is one of the ways. But he's saying in an active life, if you try to do that, then essentially you'll have to separate yourself and really go into very deep meditations. But on the other hand, you could do it on the go as you act and as you live by having faith in a higher knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you.
Aditya.
So, the 4 methods you mentioned was to reach to the higher mental consciousness, right? That's the goal to reach. They're not the. And where is that?
They're not the supermind. So this is
Okay.
what I told you. Building the intuitive mind is an intermediate step. He's saying it's even what we are discussing right now, the fullness of what he's calling the overmind Maya. It's a necessary intermediate step. He's saying that has to be, it's not sufficient, but you cannot bypass it. You cannot say that, we don't want to go there, so let's directly go to the supermind. You can't directly go to the supermind. You have to stabilize the overmental cosmic consciousness, and then you can take the next step.
So the 4 methods, which chapter has it, like, elaborated?
It's called it's in synthesis itself. It's in the 4th part. It's called the intuitive mind.
Okay. Yeah.
Swaha.
I just wondered if you had any advice, because for some of us, porosity isn't the problem. It's filtering, managing sorting what actually comes in, almost constantly. If you're empathic, the world is not an easy place to be, actually. And so I'm just wondering about that, because on the part where you were saying hunches and stuff, that I call that guidance, and that part is clear. It's more, I would say, I guess, on the emotional level, or even physical in a way, with various kinds of devastation and destruction and that kind of stuff. It's like, how do you manage receiving a lot of stuff?
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Opening up the subliminal can kind of flood you with all kinds of information and all kinds of knowledge, understanding, intimations, foreknowledges, and things like that. So there has to be a very strong center, which is really kind of selecting what it is that one wants. And there, in that chapter, it's an interesting chapter, because also, I'm sure it's a certain stage in his own development. And so he's pointing to two things there. One is, of course, the psychic being. He's saying it's not just a psychic receptivity. It has to be a full awakening of the psychic being that knows exactly what it wants. And so it knows what to cast out and what to take. And the other is, you see, that the thing about the vastness and the kind of inundation by information is also interesting, because he's saying that also has to happen at a certain point, because you are the cosmic being. But if you are actually experiencing yourself as a narrow individual, just open to the cosmos, then that's what you're going to feel. But if you are the cosmic being, it's not going to make any, you can contain it. It's part of your existence to be the vast being in which everything is inundating you. So to do that, one has to rise above to that higher plane. And there's a part in that chapter, that's the interesting thing about that chapter, where he's saying we start becoming open at the level of the heart often, but we haven't fully gone to the psychic being, and we haven't opened up the higher knowledge. So at that point, what happens is he says, he's got a part there where he says the heart is a dark place, because the heart is a mixture of good and bad. We are pulled and pushed by emotional, energies that are, So he's saying to build the connection with the 1,000-petaled lotus is absolutely necessary, because that is what will allow something to clarify, that the knowledge comes down and clarifies impersonally what we are otherwise personalizing all the time. So that's one. And then the full opening of the psychic being
that's one
becomes the other.
That personal thing is also an issue, because it's not, even when I experience things that are coming from other people, it still feels like me, but it's not personal. It's like, it's just all me, in a way.
Yeah.
But not little me. Little me is not concerned, about any of it. I don't feel fear or anything, but just, there's a fair amount of anguish, I guess.
Yes, I know. Yes. So that's the part where he's saying that, once the psychic being emerges, it can sort of accept all this and see that we have to forge ahead through all this. And then the other thing is that becoming the more and more in contact with the cosmic being, he has this poem called the Cosmic Consciousness. I think it's one of his sonnets, where he's talking about experiencing the bombs bursting in the Second World War in his larger body, So everything is happening there. but it's
Yes.
because it's contained by the vastness of that body that it accepts it as that which is reality.
Yeah, thanks.
Maybe we
I
can
should
read one
read that
more.
poem every morning.
Should we read one more? Let's see where we are. Yeah, I think the next one is a long paragraph, but I think it'll be a good thing to read it because we are leading into the last part of this sequence of chapters. And this is really what he was experiencing. It's a critical, phase of his understanding when he was in the jail and coming out of it, where he formulated the goals of the rest of his life in a way, and saw the fact that there is this bridge to be built between, firstly, to enter into the higher planes above the mind, and then to bridge that with the supermind. So that's where we are right now. And maybe we can read that paragraph and then move on, right? Next time we can consider it. So maybe Margaret, would you like to read that paragraph? This limitation is true only.
This limitation is true only so long as man remains closed within the boundaries of the mental Maya. If he rises into the knowledge self beyond the highest mental stature, if he becomes the knowledge soul, the spirit poised in gnosis, Vijnanamaya Purusha, and puts on the nature of its infinite truth and power. If he lives in the knowledge sheath, the causal body, as well as in these subtle mental interlinking vital and grosser physical sheaths or bodies, then, but then only, he will be able to draw down entirely into his terrestrial existence the fullness of the infinite spiritual consciousness. Only then will he avail to raise his total being and even his whole manifested, embodied, expressive nature into the spiritual kingdom. But this is difficult in the extreme, for the causal body opens itself readily to the consciousness and capacities of the spiritual planes and belongs in its nature to the higher hemisphere of existence. But it is either not developed at all in man, or only as yet crudely developed and organized and veiled behind many intervening portals of the subliminal in us. It draws its stuff from the plane of the truth knowledge and the plane of the infinite bliss, and these pertain altogether to a still inaccessible higher hemisphere. Shedding upon this lower existence their truth and light and joy, they are the source of all that we call spirituality and all that we call perfection. But this infiltration comes from behind thick coverings through which they arrive so tempered and weakened that they are entirely obscured in the materiality of our physical perceptions, grossly distorted and perverted in our vital impulses. Perverted too, though a little less grossly in our ideative seekings, minimized even in the comparative purity and intensity of the highest intuitive ranges of our mental nature. The supramental principle is secretly lodged in all existence. It is there even in the grossest materiality. It preserves and governs the lower worlds by its hidden power and law. But that power veils itself, and that law works unseen through the shackled limitations and limping deformations of the lesser rule of our physical, vital, mental nature. Yet its governing presence in the lowest forms assures us, because of the unity of all existence, that there is a possibility of their awakening, a possibility even of their perfect manifestation here, in spite of every veil, in spite of all the mass of our apparent disabilities, in spite of the incapacity or unwillingness of our mind and life and body. And what is possible must one day be, for that is the law of the omnipotent spirit.
What a comfort. Shri Aurobindo.
Debashish, reading this and the discussion about the different dimensions and such, the one concept that came to me, I wondered if it's could be seen as a simple analogy, is when one experiences lucid dreaming, you know, you're experiencing the dream, but you're observing the dream from a distance. So it's as if you're operating in two dimensions at once. And so I wondered if that's, you know, a way to help us understand what it would mean to move, you know, up to another dimension, to be more fully present with that expanded awareness.
Yeah, certainly that would be something like that. And that's you recollect that the mother says that she would put something like 11 or 12 bodies into sleep progressively. You know, that was part of her occult training, that she would go into sleep and then experience that as a separate body, while the body on the ground actually, and she would maintain a link so that this body on the ground could also still operate to some extent and talk. It would talk. And she was in another dream body, and then she would be aware that it's a dream body and put that to sleep and emerge into another subtler body. Wow. And so on and so forth. So here, actually what Sri Aurobindo is saying here is similar, because this what we read so far, including this particular paragraph, could be considered a very high level interpretation of the Taittiriya Upanishad, of the third part of the Taittiriya Upanishad. And there, it's exactly these rungs that are talked about. And there are rungs that are being experienced in meditation. So that each one is an identification with Brahman. That there is an identification with Brahman at the level of matter. And it's almost like talking about porosity. The matter itself is porous. And ultimately, what we call our material self sort of merges into the matter around us. There's a kind of constant, you know, flow going on in material, which today, even in science, we know that we have a biome around us.
Correct.
You know, which is really a material extension, a living material extension. But he's saying that even subtle sort of, you know, layers or sheets of what we call matter are connected to whatever is happening around us. This transfer of information going on there. So then, having that realization, this being is called on to get into the level of life and realize that that also is a universal being, you know, a kind of it's Brahman itself. It's the all being as life. And so on, when it comes to mind, then it's still within exactly what he's saying, the overmind. And then it goes to Vijnana. And Sri Aurobindo is translating that as the causal body. He has used that term elsewhere for the supermind, the causal body, because that's the cause. And everything else is an effect, or actually he says it's an instrument. So mind, that's the reason why when we say mind is a faculty that makes distinctions, we take those distinctions as the ability by which we come to knowledge. But he's saying it's the ability by which knowledge practically makes itself active. It's an instrument of knowledge.
Yeah.
So in going there, he's talking about this shift, this dimensional shift, which is really, I mean, like you're saying, what you're talking about, the other way of thinking about it, this lucid dreaming is one way, but meditational states of trance is another way of talking about it.
Yeah.
He's saying that in the chapter where he's talking about the Mandukya Upanishad, he's saying that normally we entering into trance is like falling into a kind of a sleep in which we lose our our external consciousness, and we fall entirely into an internal consciousness. But he's saying that we have to train ourselves to be operating in both and go deeper and deeper into these trance states while retaining our normal state. So in other words, we're building a continuum of consciousness between the subliminal consciousness and our ordinary sense of self, I mean, in a way, I mean, that Jung was trying to do something similar, at least in the beginning stages, which is what he's calling active imagination. That's another method, you see, the whole method of active imagination, which is what he was using in the Red Book or the Black Book before the Red Book to arrive at a integration of the unconscious, the collective unconscious, and his personal active consciousness. And he uses the term the ego self axis. So there is a constant, the self, which is for him, the self is like the universal self, right? It's not the individual self, it's really the universal self. There's a constant communication, hidden communication going on, but we are not aware of it. But through processes like this, either active imagination or other kinds of processes that he was trying to arrive at, or what Sri Aurobindo is saying, entering into intuitive states, receptivity to the higher chakras. He's using the Indian system, the tantric system. We activate and become more aware of the communication that's going on between our deeper bodies, including this causal body, and to prepare that, because as he's describing it here, it is so deeply hidden. It is so folded in that we don't seem to have any contact with it.
Yeah.
But we can, and that's the point he's making, and the beautiful way in which he ends. He's saying it's present everywhere. It's present in our bodies. It's present in our emotions. It's present in our mind. And even the very cells of our body can express that full divine consciousness, because that is the truth of our essence.
The last sentence, Debashish.
Yeah.
What is possible must one day be, or that is the law of the omnipotent spirit.
Right. Soonki.
Could you say difference between the connection the connection Sri Aurobindo mentioned between the awakened and subliminal state and Jung's ego self-access, that Jung's connection and what Sri Aurobindo meant the connection between the awakened and subliminal state.
I'm trying to see it in the in the paragraph where exactly he's talking about the subliminal and the. Does he say that? Does he use those terms there?
No, you mentioned. You explained.
Yeah.
Sri Aurobindo mentioned somewhere else. We need to. We should.
Yeah. By awakened, I meant our waking consciousness, what the Mandukya Upanishad calls Jagrat. Not awakened consciousness in the sense of, Bodhi that the Buddha is talking about. I'm saying just our normal waking consciousness, which is Jagrat. That consciousness, which is really our ego consciousness to start with, our exclusive sense of self, and the subliminal consciousness, which opens to the universal, right? There is a connection between the two. But we are it's a hidden connection. It's not that it's not operating. There's constant commerce going on, but we are oblivious of it. It's just coming in, and we are in our higher moments, in our creative moments, in our moments of trance, etc. We are making the connection. See, so whether we talk about Sri Aurobindo and the notion of creating an intuitive mind, or if we talk about Jung and the process, the whole idea of individuation in Jung has to do exactly with this. What is individuation? Individuation is an activation of the ego self-axis, so that particular, kind of relation becomes completely conscious. It isn't hidden. See, the self, which is the universal self, which dwells in the collective unconscious, makes itself, the agent, rather than the ego, which is otherwise the agent. So there's a connection between the two, a yoga between, we may say, the jiva, and in this case, some kind of a cosmic Purusha. You see, this is what is, in a way, as I understand it, the process that Jung is trying to open up in his alchemical and spiritual teachings.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think we'll come to an end over here, and our next class I will be taking from India, but yeah, it'll be fine. We'll continue our studies. It will be 8 o'clock in the morning for me, which will be fine. Everything is good.
Safe travel.
7 o'clock.
It's
7
going
o'clock.
back
No,
with
but
a lot this year.
Huh?
No, Anastasia, it will be 8 o'clock because the time will change.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, okay. I see. Thanks.
Tomorrow, yeah.
Yeah.
Safe travels.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Welcome back.
Thank you.